Hello students, welcome back to the channel. Today we're looking at arranging fractions in ascending order. Now in order to arrange fractions, we always have to make sure that they are placed over a common denominator. So if you don't know how to find the common denominator, the lowest common or the lowest common multiple, I did a video on that, so you can always go and have a look and bring yourself up to speed before you proceed in this video. So we're looking at 1/3, a half, and 2/5, and we're comparing them to see which is the biggest, which is the least, and putting them in the order from least to biggest. Ascending order. To ascend means to go up. So we must first put them over the same denominator. In this case, the LCM is 30. The LCM of 3, 2, and 5 is 30. So 3 goes into 30 10 times. 1 times 10 is 10. 2 goes into 30 15 times. 1 times 15, 15. 5 goes into 30 6 times. 2 times 6 gives 12. So now we are to compare. We have created some equivalent fractions here. 10/30 is equivalent to 1/3. 15/30 is equivalent to a half. And 5/30 is equivalent to 2/5. So, 12/30 is equivalent to 2/5. So now that we have them over the same denominator, we can go ahead and compare them. And we see that the 10 is the smallest. So we write the 1/3. The 12 is next, so we write the 2/5. And the 15 is the biggest, so we write the half. Now if we had just looked at them on the face value, just what they look like, many students would think that the half would be the smallest because 2 is smaller than 3 and 5. However, when we actually compare them and put them over a common denominator, we see that a half is actually the biggest of the 3 fractions. So this just goes to show that when you're dealing with fractions, you have to be very careful. You can't just look at it. You can't just say, oh, it has a big number there, so it must be the biggest. In many cases, the bigger the denominator, in many cases, the smaller the fraction is. So let's compare these 3. The LCM of 9, 3, and 6, that would be 18. 9 goes into 18 2 times, 3 2s are 6. So what we're doing is we're creating equivalent fractions with the same denominator so we can compare them. 3 goes into 18 6 times, 1 times 6 is 6. 6 goes into 18 3 times, 2 3s are 6. What have we here? What have we here? We see that all these 3 fractions were the same fraction. They give us 6/18. All of them are equivalent to 6/18. So that simply means it doesn't matter which order we put them in. So let's just put them back in the same order we were given. And we're also going to make a note to say that they are all equivalent. You know, because we want to show off, we want the teacher to know that we understand what we're doing, right? So we're going to say, teacher, please note, these are all equivalent fractions. None is bigger than the other. So let's go to these 3. Let's see what these 3 have to say. Now we have 14, 2, and 7. The LCM of 14, 2, and 7 is 14. That's the smallest number that all 3 of them can go into equally. 14 goes into 14 once. 5 times 1, 5. 2 goes into 14 7 times. 1 times 7 is 7. 7 goes into 14 2 times. 3 2s are 6. So now that we compare them, we see that the 5/14 is the smallest, followed by the 6/14, which is 3/7, that's the equivalent, followed by the 7/14, which is the half. So again, we see the half coming out on top, even though it looks like the tiniest, beaniest, weeniest, teeniest one. You cannot tell just by looking with fractions. Looks can be deceiving. Don't judge the fraction by what it looks like. You actually have to go in and compare them with the same denominator before you can really tell. Now let's look at these. If we look at these ones, we notice that they all have 1 in the numerator. Whenever you're comparing fractions and they all have 1 in the numerator, you can go to the denominator and compare them, but here's the catch. The one with the biggest denominator will turn out to be the smallest fraction. When all of them have 1 as the numerator, or when all the numerators are the same, put it that way, go to the denominator, and the one that has the biggest denominator represents the smallest fraction. Why? If you have the same shape or the same, let's use a cake, since most people love talking about cakes, right? If you're going to cut the cake into 16 pieces, if you have to share it among 16 persons, each person will get a smaller, tiny little slice than if you just had 3 people to share the cake among. Each person would get a bigger piece, a bigger share. So 1/16 is a smaller fraction than 1/3. 1/3 is a bigger fraction than 1/8. So we can just go ahead and compare them. We know the 1/16 is the smallest, followed by the 1/8, followed by the quarter, and 1/3 is actually the biggest fraction of this lot. It looks like the smallest because you have the 3 and you say, man, the 16 must be bigger. No, it's one little part out of the 16 pieces that you cut up, those tiny pieces. And this one only had to cut it in 3. So it's a bigger share. So in ascending order from least to biggest, this is how it goes. Alright, so let's compare these. Now we have 10, 5, and 20. The LCM is 20. All these numbers can go into 20. Alright, so 10 goes into 20 2 times. 6 times 2 would give 12. 5 goes into 20 4 times. 2 4s are 8. 20 goes into itself once. 2 1s are 2. Alright, let me get some chalk. Okay, so we're comparing now. We're saying 12, 8, and 2. Clearly, the 2 is the smallest. So 2 over 20 is the smallest one. Followed by the 8 over 20, which is equivalent to the 2/5. Followed by the 12 over 20, which is equivalent to the 6/10. So there they are in ascending order from least to biggest. Let's compare these 3, the LCM of 8, 5, and 10, 40. 8, 5, and 10 can all go into 40. 8 goes into 40 5 times. 6 5s are 30. 5 goes into 40 8 times. 3 8s are 24. 10 goes into 40 4 times. 1 4 4. So putting them in ascending order now, the 4/40 is the smallest, so that's the 1/10. Followed by the 24 over 40, which is the 3/5. And the biggest is the 30 over 40, which is the 6/8. Okay, so we're getting there. We are getting there. So let's see. 5, 8, and 20. Again, the LCM is 40. 5 goes into 48 times. 3 8s are 24. 8 goes into 45 times. 2 5s are 10. 20 goes into 40. 2 times 1 times 2, 2. Do you see that? Do you see? The 20 would cause many people to believe that was the biggest fraction. They just see the 20 popping out at them and they said that must be the biggest one. But what do you see? It's actually the smallest one. Because you're cutting up the same thing into 20 parts and you're taking out one of that tiny part. And here you're cutting up the same thing into 5 parts and you're taking out 3 of those big chunks. This is the bigger fraction, the biggest of the 3. So the smallest would be the 2 over 40, which is the 1/20th. Then we have the 10 over 40, which is the 2/8. And the biggest is the 24 over 40, which is the 3/5. Fractions can deceive you. Don't just look and guess. Check it. Check it to make sure. So let's compare these. 2 of them have the same denominator, but this one doesn't. The LCM is actually 4 because 2 can go into 4. So 4 goes into itself once, 3 once, 3. 4 goes into itself once, 1 times 1 is 1. 2 goes into 4 twice. 1 times 2 is 2. So let's see now. The smallest would be this one, the quarter, followed by the half, followed by the 3/4. So you should know these. You should know these are pretty common. A quarter is the smallest, then the half, and the 3/4 is the biggest. So in ascending order, quarter, half, 3/4. Again, now we're comparing. The numerators are all ones. I remember what we said. What did we say? When the numerators are all ones, we can look at the denominator and what's the catch? The bigger the denominator, the smaller the fraction. So when all of them have ones as the numerator, the bigger denominator is the smaller fraction. So that means this is the smallest fraction, 1/30th, followed by 1/15, followed by 1/9, followed by 1/7. 1/7 is the biggest out of them. Again, if you have the same thing and you cut it up into 30 pieces, each of those pieces will be so tiny compared to if you only cut it into 7 pieces and each person gets a piece, right? It's not so small as this, certainly not. So it's the 1/30th, then the 1/15th, then the 1/9, and the 1/7 is the biggest out of all of these 4. So the main thing for you to remember when you're dealing with fractions, you're comparing them, they must be placed over the same denominator, except where all the numerators are the same, then you can just go and compare the denominators, remembering that the bigger the denominator, the smaller the fraction. Alright? Other than that though, make sure that you put them over the same denominator. That's the only way you can really compare them. Unless you're going to go out, get the cakes or get whatever it is you're going to share up and actually share it up, which is a good thing to do, you know, to see it in reality what we're talking about. So when you do that, you will see for sure what size, to compare the sizes using your senses. However, we don't have any cake right now, right? So all we have to go with are our chalk and board, and you would have your pencil and your paper. So we really have to find a way to pen it out. And that way is to find the LCM, and then you compare the numerators. And if you're asked to put them in ascending order, you put the smallest first, then the next, and end with the biggest. Now, check the next video. We're going to be looking at comparing fractions, writing them in descending order, going down from the greatest to the lowest. Pretty similar, except that the arrangement is going to be the opposite way, right? So join me for that video. If you enjoyed this one and if you learned from it, please share it with others so they can enjoy and learn. We're spreading the word. We're getting rid of the fear of math all over the place. We want everybody to love math, to embrace math, and to be good at math. Alright, so my scholars, I'll see you in the next video. Take care of yourselves.